Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Friday, January the 10th. And welcome to our commentary. If you live in the North Texas area, then you know we've had a little bit of ice, a little bit of snow. It's clear right now in late afternoon, but I guess it's going to freeze up again Friday night. So you're probably better off not going out Saturday morning because of the ice. But I'm not a weather person, but I'm just giving you a little bit of advice. You might want to just stay in, have some coffee, and stay in on Saturday morning, maybe until about noon when things do clear up. Of course, around here, we have a huge game on Friday night between Texas and Ohio State. This is the Cotton Bowl. And one of these two teams, Texas or Ohio State, is going to play Notre Dame for the national championship, I guess, the week later. So it's going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting around here from a football standpoint. And then we hope that when people are driving home after the game, which could be 10:30, even perhaps as late as 11 o'clock, that the streets are still more watery than icy. I think that's probably going to be the case because the ice won't really have an impact until probably after midnight, early morning. But man, the last time there was a big game around here, the Super Bowl back in 2011, we had an ice storm. And here you have probably the biggest game we've had around here since the Cotton Bowl, at least this particular Cotton Bowl between Texas and Ohio State. And here we have not as bad as it was in 2011. That was a lot worse, but nevertheless, it's pretty nasty. So I'm hoping that the Longhorns win, but I bet there's a lot of traditionalists, college football traditionalists, who would love to see Ohio State play Notre Dame. That's almost something out of the past that would be interesting for the more traditional fans. But I'm hoping for Texas. I'm hoping that Texas gets in. But it's going to be a tough game. Ohio State is always a very, very tough opponent. Well, the big story, of course, today is that the New York case against Trump finally came to an end. And it came to an end in the probably dumbest way that it could have ended. I mean, it was like an absolutely ridiculous ending to a pretty ridiculous case. If you haven't heard, the judge says you're guilty, or the jury found you guilty, he says, but I'm not going to punish you in any way. No jail, no probation, nothing. I mean, you're walk out. You're guilty, but you just walk out without any consequences. Of course, this is not the end of this case. The Trump people will appeal it. And look, every expert I've heard says that he's going to win on appeal because there were just a lot of mistakes that were made in this case. But beyond that, this was such a politicization of our judicial system. I mean, every American concerned with justice should be very angry with what they did to President Trump. Whatever you feel about President Trump, however you feel about him, whether you voted for him or voted against him, I hope that everybody understands just how ugly this whole case was and this whole prosecution was and how unfair it was on President Trump. So what I'm hoping is that when he goes to appeal, and again, most experts believe that it will be appealed and thrown out, that after that he sues the city of New York, the district attorney, and this judge, claiming that his rights were violated. I hope he does, because I think he's got a good case that his rights were violated. And I hope that, somebody was saying that Judge Merchan can now walk around saying that he's the one who convicted Trump. Of course, when he says course, not the only one. And here we are. The ending was even more ridiculous than the whole case. What can I tell you? No penalty for President Trump. After all these months, they were telling us he was a threat to democracy. My gosh, the next dictator. no penalty whatsoever. I'm anxious to hear what some Democrats are thinking, because you got to be wondering whether all of this may have brought them a little satisfaction seeing Trump in court, but he's also going to be back in the White House. And I'm just beginning to wonder if maybe some Democrats out there don't realize that, in our effort to get Trump, we ended up getting him reelected. I wonder how many are beginning to realize the impact of that. Well, the other big story, of course, is the fires in LA. I have a post coming out about this tomorrow, and I think that the larger point here is not just about the LA fire, which of course is terrible, and the people who've suffered so much, people who've lost homes, and you wonder if they're ever going to be able to even rebuild them because of the money it's going to take. And, California is not exactly the easiest place to build anything because of all the regulations. So you begin to wonder whether many of these people, and that's what I argue in my post, whether maybe many of these people are just going to pack up and leave California and they're going to move somewhere else. There's plenty of places they can move to, even within California, I suppose. But many of them may just decide, you know what, I've had it, I'm done. And they'll move somewhere else. Maybe they move to Colorado, which has become a very popular place for some people from California, particularly the more liberal ones. Maybe the more entrepreneurial, more business people will just end up moving to Texas. We have plenty of those here too. So it's just I argue in my post that this is not just a case of LA and the fires and all the incredible incompetence that we saw, fire hydrants that don't draw water. How can you explain that? But this is also a case, I believe, of what's happening to many of these blue cities. These blue cities are simply not doing a very good job of delivering services, of protecting people, of providing a climate for business to prosper and for people to live and for schools to function. So, I think you're going to see a lot of liberals just pick up, or a lot of people, period, just pick up and leave California, especially when they begin to realize that there's no money to rebuild their properties. And the legislature doesn't have any money either. Legislature doesn't have a dime. This is going to cost over $100 billion, I just heard, all the damage. Where are they going to get money like that? They're not going to get it from the insurance companies. Many of these insurance companies left town a year or so ago because it was so crazy to do business. So it's just going to be, I think there's going to be an exodus of people. That's what I think is going to happen. You're going to see more and more people just moving out and moving to Texas or wherever they go. I mean, it doesn't have to be Texas. As I say, some will go to Nevada, some will go to Colorado. Maybe some will come to Texas. I don't know. But the reality is that people will be moving out. That's what I think is going to happen. And where does that leave California? I don't know. At some point, somebody out there, some light bulb has to go off in California, and somebody's going to have to say, you know what? We're losing our productive people here, folks. It's at some point when all the taxpayers leave, who's going to pick up the tab for everything that has to be provided by a society? I don't know. Anyway, good luck to everybody out in LA. I feel terrible. I know I've heard of some cases of people that I know indirectly who lost their homes. And what a terrible situation that is. A couple of things on this day in history. 1982, this was the big game between San Francisco and Dallas, the Cowboys, this jacket that I'm wearing. And this was the big game between San Francisco and Dallas, the NFC championship game at the old Candlestick Park in San Francisco. And they're coming down to the last couple of minutes. San Francisco is driving. The Cowboys are winning. I think they're up by 6 at this point. And the 49ers are driving. And this is when Montana goes back and he throws that catch that, Dwight Clark jumps in the air and he catches that catch. And it becomes known as the catch. It was a very unlikely, it was not a good throw, but it was an amazing catch by Dwight Clark. And that went down in history, of course, as the catch. But here's the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say. The Cowboys got the ball back. The Cowboys got the ball back as to the kickoff after the touchdown, and they were driving, and they were getting to field goal range or getting very close to it. There was a great catch by Drew Pearson that drove him up to, I think, like the 25 or the 30. So they were, in San Francisco territory, positioning themselves for a last minute or a last second field goal. But then Danny White, the quarterback, fumbled, and the 49ers got the ball, and that was the end of the game and the end of the season for the Cowboys. The 49ers went on to play, I believe, Cincinnati in the Super Bowl and went on to win the first of their four Super Bowls, Joe Montana being the quarterback who won all four of those Super Bowls. So it was a great game. It was a great game, and it's known as the catch. It's known as the catch. And if you ever have a chance, you can go to YouTube and see much of the highlights of that great game. It was a great game. I can tell it was a great game. Great game to watch. I'm just kind of sorry that the Cowboys were on literally the short end. The final score was San Francisco 27, Cowboys 26. And again, they were driving. The Cowboys had the ball driving, and they were getting close to field goal range. So again, this is what happens in sports. That's why sports is so unpredictable, but at the same time, such a heartbreak because of things like this that just totally destroy you as a fan. You're watching these games. I have a post that came out yesterday. That would have been Thursday morning, the 9th, where I remembered President Richard Nixon, who was born on back in 1913 in California. And he passed away in 1994. And I remember specifically in my post how Richard Nixon, as vice president of the United States, met with Fidel Castro, who had just come to power in Cuba. And Castro and Nixon had a conversation in Washington, D.C. And, when Nixon finished the conversation, he basically said, this guy is either very naive or he's a communist. Because he just couldn't believe what he was hearing. Well, of course, he turned out to be a communist, if not right away, a couple of years later. And Richard Nixon turned out to be right. So I wrote an article about that, referring to that incident, which would have been in April of 1959, roughly 3 months after, or 2 months after, Castro had been made prime minister of Cuba. So Richard Nixon, we remember Richard Nixon. And as I say in my post, the man who saw through Fidel Castro back in early 1959. Well, have a great weekend, everybody. And again, be careful driving if you're in the Metroplex. A little bit of ice Saturday morning, but it's supposed to clear up for the rest of the weekend. And I just heard something that next week it's going to be in the 60s. So I guess the crazy weather and these crazy temperatures that always characterize Texas, they're back. Freezing one day, warm the next. That's just the way it is around here. Thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas. Enjoy yourselves, and we'll talk to you later.